Hello, Bookaholics. Welcome back to my channel. This is Angela, your own Bookaholic Brownim. Today, I have come to you with a very special episode in this channel, and it is a collaboration video with a couple of other booktubers whom I highly appreciate and highly respect, and I watch all of their contents without fail. And we are going to talk about the epic fantasy series of all time, The Wheel of Time by Robert Jordan. A little bit of disclaimer before I take you to the recording of our collab video. This was my first time doing a collab video, so I didn't know much about how to do the recording and things like that. So we started the call and I started recording on the Zoom app, and what I did not realize is that if I do it that way, it will capture only the current speaker, and the other speakers will not be visible in smaller boxes. For that, I should have done a screen sharing, which I did not know. I learned it after the fact, and unfortunately that's a goof up that you have to put up with in this video. But other than that, the four of us had a blast talking about the best-selling fantasy novel of all time, which is The Wheel of Time. So without wasting any more of your time, let's get into the collab video. Welcome everybody to my channel, and today in my channel we have some very special guests. I would like to hand over to my first guest here, Grace. Ladies first, would you like to give a short introduction?
Yeah, so I'm Grace. I guess my name is in the little corner, but my channel name is just Grace Dion. And I do a lot of fantasy on my channel, so naturally wanted to join the Wheel of Time discussion, but yeah, I don't know. That's pretty much it.
Yeah, Niko?
Hi, I am Niko. My channel is Niko's Book Reviews, which I have titled as well. I was super excited when Angela asked me about this because I am a very large Wheel of Time fan, as will become evident. So really excited for this. But I do almost only fantasy with the very occasional other type of book on my channel.
Awesome. Andrew?
Hi, I'm Andrew from Andrew's Visible Reads. I just updated my name card to actually from my actual name to my channel name. But I am a very big Wheel of Time fan. As you can see, the logo right there, and all my hardcovers up above. If I can get my finger into frame, there we go. And so I'm super excited to talk Wheel of Time. It is my favorite series of all time. And let's just go.
Sure. So I want to put up a disclaimer to our audience that this should be mostly not spoiler free, right? So let's keep it that way, because especially for me, because I'm just starting book two. So, but still, I'm sure we have a lot of things to talk about when it comes to Wheel of Time. So I would like to ask Grace, because she is kind of a newbie like me, because she has not finished the series. I think she is into book 6 now, or you just finished book 6. So my question to you is, when you started Wheel of Time, what was your first impression of it? If you have any precedent, like, Lord of the Ring as comparison, or maybe Game of Thrones or something, how did Wheel of Time fare?
So it's interesting because just based on the type of reader that I am, I've always been I think more willing to give a chance than other people, where I know that a lot of people say that the first book doesn't do it for them because it starts slow, but I don't mind that it starts slow. Like the fact that I knew I was getting into such a long series, I was like, okay, I'm going to read at least probably 2 or 3 just to see what I think. And so I knew that I was in it, and I did really enjoy the start. And I did think, like you mentioned, Lord of the Rings, obviously there are some heavy comparisons to be made at the start to Lord of the Rings, and I did see that very obviously happening, but I also knew based on what I had heard people say that it diverges from that. So my my view was, I have faith that it's going to happen, it's going to diverge, and then it did. So I was good.
Mhm. Yeah. What about you, Andrew? Do you even remember the first time you read it? Because
Me?
it's a long time ago. Yes.
Uh, how long has it been? Let's see. If I'm 31 now and I started reading it when I was 14, if I can do basic math, it's been what, 17 years?
Mm.
So
Started
it's
reading
been
it
a
in
while.
March.
I've told the story before where I was in middle school. It was either 6th or 7th grade, and I walked up to another friend of mine who loved to read, and he was always walking around with like It or like just really big thick books. And I was talking at his locker one day, and it fell out of his locker. I picked it up. I saw the blue cover. Blue's my favorite color. And I was like, "What's this?" He's like, "Oh, I think you like that." And so I ended up borrowing that. And then soon after, I went to Borders Books, which is, no longer in business, and bought one of those mass market paperback box sets. And I don't remember my initial read, but I do remember my initial impression of the read. And I just, because this is, way pre-booktube, I think this is pre-YouTube. Um it was definitely, it was something special to me, mainly because I didn't know about all these other series. And so I didn't have, anything to compare it to really other than Lord of the Rings, which I'd already read and loved. And I like that slow, kind of beautifully built world with just lots of description. And so to me, I never felt like Eye of the World was a slow book. I just thought it was a beautiful book.
Okay. Niko, you also started reading, I mean, it's a long time ago, maybe in school or college?
So, yeah, I was trying to think back and do the math too after I heard Andrew. I think it's been for me as well about 16 years. Because I was in sixth grade when I started the Wheel of Time, and it was just, yeah, it was kind of a random suggestion that was made to me because I had started to read fantasy and I hadn't read a ton of stuff yet, but I'd been basically reading everything I could. And I just, for me, especially with The Eye of the World, the first book, it's every time I go back and just read like the very beginning, just kind of the opening scene about like the wind blowing, and like it's not the beginning, but it is all of that. It just like it gives me so much nostalgia every time. The first reaction, because I get the same one every time I do a reread. It's just always like it just, I don't know, pulls me straight in, and I absolutely loved it. And then started interlibrary loaning every one of the books repeatedly so that I could read them all, because that was the only way I had access to get them at the time,
Mm.
because I was, young and didn't have a job or like money or anything. So,
Yeah, good. So with me, just like Grace was mentioning before our video started, that before BookTube, I didn't know Wheel of Time existed. So I definitely got some kind of indication of what to expect from the Wheel of Time in general, and also from the beginning of the books, like book one, book two, etc. So I don't know if that had any influence in the way I felt about the books or the book, right? Because I really loved it. And if nobody had warned me that the book is very slow, maybe I would have not loved it. I don't know. But because the fans are so good, I know, and they will give you the right guidance and that they set the right expectations, I think that that was really helpful. And now I am like more pumped, to read book two instead of, just disregarding it as, it's too slow, it's not for me. But again, I think that in book one also, it's only the first 30 or so chapters which are kind of slow, but the pace really picks up for me. At least I felt that after chapter 30, and when it reached chapter 45, it was like super fast. This is what I felt. So I don't quite agree that the book one and book two are too slow. Yes, I think it might be intentional that, he decided to write this long, sprawling story, Robert Jordan, and then he wanted to take it slow. It could be intentional also. So I have no complaints for now. No?
Yeah, I agree. I definitely don't think book two is slow. And also Andrew and Niko, what you guys both kind of said about your first experiences reminded me that I kind of maybe didn't express myself properly when I talk about like knowing what I'm getting into with a long series, because I love like epic fantasy, and knowing that that's what I was getting into when I started was like, I loved just to immerse myself in it and to know that I was going to be there for a long time and to just like experience it. So love that.
Yeah, and
I think you both bring up. Oh, go ahead, Andrew.
no, so the only thing I was gonna say is in terms of pacing, one thing that I like to always point out is, well, I don't know if I always point it out, but I have pointed out before, the first like 4 to 6 books are the tightest of the story because the story was initially meant to be much shorter.
Oh,
It's one of those books where it was so successful that like the publisher gave Robert Jordan more rope
mhm.
to put out more books. And so he was able to really expand everything, which is kind of where we get the slog because, he was like, oh, well, I can expand on all this now.
Yeah.
I think it was initially, and Niko, correct me if I'm wrong. I think it was initially meant to be 5 to 7 books.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it started as potentially like a trilogy, and it was going to be like five, and it kept going. But
Yeah,
that's what you'll see too, like um, the end of the Eye of the World with being completely spoiler free, if with some very minor tweaks, could be the end of the series.
absolutely.
If you were, I mean, you'd be changing almost everything about the story, but the way it was designed, it's that, well, hey, if the publishers want me to continue this series, I'll make it so I can kind of end it here if it's a standalone book now. And so yeah, you definitely can see those points in the first few books where it's like, oh, this could have been an ending, but he got to keep going, and for that, I'm very grateful.
To be also spoiler free, I thought that about the end of book two.
hmm Yeah, book two and book three both have similar elements where with some tweaks, it could have been
And then
ended.
right there.
Yeah.
Okay.
Go
So,
ahead. What I was going to say really quick, sorry,
yes.
was just I think both of you, Angela and Grace, bring up a great point about how kind of knowing what you're getting into is important here. Um, because especially nowadays, you can find all that information. There are so many people who talk about this on BookTube or online. So kind of knowing what you're getting into, I think, is really important. Because sometimes people will just start in and not really know what to expect, and then be like, "Oh, I don't like this. This isn't, as fast paced as what I'm used to reading with more modern fantasy." And yeah, I don't find it particularly slow overall, especially since I've read a lot of actually really slow authors that like, Robin Hobb, whom I love, who is like the queen of the really slow burn type fantasy as well. So Wheel of Time has never felt that slow to me, but
Mhm.
kind of knowing that it is a slower paced, very descriptive world, I think will help your experience if you know what that's to expect to that.
The other thing about the pacing that I think is interesting, that I just thought of while you were talking, Niko, is like, I think that the slower pacing is probably what allows Robert Jordan to build at the right like speed for the world and the characters and things, because another, maybe not complaint, but could be a pro or a con depending on who you are, is like the number of named characters, the number of places, how much you have to remember. And if that's not your type of thing, then you won't enjoy having to remember that much. And if the books were paced faster, then all of that would be being fed to you even faster and would probably be even tougher to you to like wrap your head around. So
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
it's like a double-edged sword, I guess. I feel like he did it properly in that sense.
Which is why the
Yeah.
encyclopedia exists.
I was gonna say, this is the Wheel of Time encyclopedia, so it does
Wow.
exist. Every character and named place is in an entry. So
Oh my
Oh,
god. Do they have a paperback of that?
I don't know. I mean, they could
Probably,
be
actually, I
coming
think they
out.
do.
Because I have all of actually, I feel like I forgot to tell you guys when I went on my crusade to buy the entire rest of the series without Amazon stickers, I was successful, but I do have them all in
Yes.
floppy paperback, so I wouldn't want to have like one hardcover.
I'm sure it's in paperback.
Match. Yeah.
It's been years since it came out, so it would seem fairly likely. But
You know what's my biggest ambition right now? I need to get those hard covers with those classic cover
Oh,
art. Oh my God, I just
they
love
are
them.
gorgeous.
Yeah.
and I
I'm
say
so
the
jealous
only
of people who
exception
have
is
it.
I love the Barnes and Noble one.
Yeah, but
But
that's on a print. It doesn't count.
yeah,
Yeah, that's my next target. Hopefully someday I can do it.
A slow
So
collection.
yes, so Grace, you talked about characters, so I think it's a nice segue now to my next question, which was your favorite character? It's the question to all of you. Maybe we can start with Grace.
So I with you only having read the first
Yeah,
book, I
book
feel
one. Yes.
I can say this spoiler free because he has been my favorite character since the beginning, and it's Perrin. I love Perrin,
Erin?
and I was surprised how much time he got in like the early books, and then I don't know, I just continued like loving him. I love the like more soft spoken, thoughtful, like big guy but like is a softie. I don't know, I just love so much about what he is, and maybe he's not like the most pivotal character in the series, but he's my fave. So
You know,
that's
Andrew?
actually a pretty popular pick among the right people. There are a lot of Perrin fans out there, so get along.
Yes, because I also, have, listened to a lot of fans talking about Perrin, but I don't know, I'm still in book one, so he hasn't impressed me yet. So, so
that's
let's see.
he gets more time. I won't, I won't say anything, but he does get more time. So
Yeah, it's the characters all get a lot more development, so a lot of people pick favorite characters based on things that have happened much later in the series. So it'll be really interesting to see like if your opinions change as you guys keep reading at all. Or
Yeah.
Grace, you're probably far enough to be set,
well, the one
but
that is on the rise for me, or I don't even know if on the rise, like I feel like he's already up there, is Matt.
that happens the further you get. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
it's like
Because like
I'm
in
a
the
really
first
big
book,
fan of Matt, but
I didn't exactly hate Matt. I just felt like he was kind of done dirty. I was like, he did not get a chance to like be like, but then as
Wait.
yeah. So I love Perrin and Matt a
for
lot.
for me, for a favorite character, it's hard for me to choose. If I have to generalize, it would probably be Matt. Early in in the series, it would be like book one. My favorite character is either Rand or Moraine. As the series goes on, there's Loyal. I've never heard it pronounced, so
That's how I
that's
say
how
it.
I say it.
yeah.
Well,
He's one of my favorites as well. I've always liked Lan because I think Lan is cool.
Oh, I love Lan.
He's supposed to be
I love them.
that edgelord bad boy.
Yeah.
He's just kind of unavailable.
So
But like later in the series, I love Min. I love Avienda. I love a lot of the female characters later in the series because a lot of the male characters get brooding or whiny. And I mean, don't get me wrong, they are justified in their brooding and their whininess. But at the same
It's
time,
still whining and brooding though. Yeah.
and so I think in the earlier books, a lot of the male characters shine because they're going through that growing period. They're discovering themselves. They're growing into this world. They're, being fitted into roles. And then, like, as life happens, it's rough. But then, as you know, the series progresses, the female characters go from girls to women, and they really flourish and they take control. And I think overall through the series, they're the most balanced characters
Mm.
because, I mean, frankly, the men are just like this, and like the women are more like this. I mean, they might dip occasionally, but like they're very, very, very uh, stable, I would say, throughout the series.
Mhm. What about you,
Avienda
Niko?
is cool. I love Avienda. Sorry.
Very good character.
Yeah.
What about you, Niko?
So yeah, I was trying to think of specifically book one because typically I'm a Matt fan, but that's because of the much later books. Matt is a character that the further you get in the series, the more I like him. Because all of my favorite plot lines and like things are much later. So yeah, book one, I would probably say out of like the main group, it was Rand, just because I feel like he had the most screen time. And I end up liking most characters Jordan introduces if he spends enough time with them. Uh, so that was early on, I think happened. But of course, Tom, I really enjoy. And he's not a ton in book one, but he's in there enough. And then I do like Lana Moraine as well. I think they're both really good characters. Moraine being the very like mysterious, like what's going on here type person.
Mhm. Yeah, so I don't know if I am the odd one out, but my favorites are not one of the main three characters. I think I would pick Lan for now because of the reasons Andrew told. I don't know. I somehow like him, and I like the particular scene between Lan and another lady in the book. Again, I don't want to give out spoilers here. So, but I really loved that scene. I don't know, it was one of the most touchy scene for me. It was, even though it was very short scene, I really liked it. And I like the fact that he is this strong and, this warrior kind of person. And, like Andrew said, unassailable, you cannot just conquer him or, defeat him, and you can always rely on him. So when he is around this gang, I feel that they're safe, right? So yeah, so Lan would be my favorite pick for now. I'm sure it will change as and when I progress through the books. So,
Yeah,
Really
he
good.
is a great character, so he'll do more to make you love him even more.
mm,
But I think other characters will also just grow on you. So I think in book one, it's definitely not out of place that you latched on more to a different character versus like the main little core group, just because none of them have really been developed yet. But Lamb kind of gets a backstory when he's introduced to an extent.
mm.
So
One of
you
my
get a
favorite
bit more
characters I'm
to
not
him.
even allowed to talk about because you haven't met her.
Well, see, I
Uh,
was really tempted to just say Bella, but
oh, I
Bella
have.
Bella's the true
Oh
hero
wait,
of the
Bella.
Wheel of Time.
yes.
Oh, never mind. I know who Bella is. I'm like, I haven't met
Yeah,
Bella. Yeah, I have.
faithful,
Yeah.
faithful, stout Bella.
Yes, Bella who carried our heroes out of the two rivers. Bella the horse, by the way. It's just for
Yeah,
the
I got it.
record for anybody.
For some
And
reason, that catches me off guard every time I hear it. Every time I hear Bella, I end up thinking it's a human before I then remember that
It's
Bella is
one
a
L.
That's
horse.
because she had so much character and soul built into her.
There's actually, I don't know if they still make them, but years ago somebody started making bumper stickers that said Bella is a dark friend. And it was just so silly. But then that was around the time that like Twilight was really popular, so people always mistook it for that apparently. And it was
Is
That
it just
that's just
that
a
Bella
would
with
fun
only one
that
L
anecdote.
would be
though, or no?
fantastic.
Wait,
What was
sorry.
that? Sorry.
What did you say?
Who, me?
yeah,
Yeah.
Oh, I said I never saw the bumper stickers, and that would be fantastic.
I never watched Twilight, so I would have never got that, reference anyway.
I
Yeah.
That's apparently a character in there.
Okay.
Twilight, yeah, I mean,
I've seen the first two movies.
I read the books when I was, I think, between like the ages of 11 and 14.
You just unhauled them.
I did, yeah.
You did?
I mean, I liked them back then, and then like I just know that I would hate them if I read them now, so I'm not going to.
I was reading Wheel of Time between 11 and 14.
Wow.
There wasn't a lot of time for anything else.
I mean, I don't think that Twilight would be quite your cup of tea, Niko.
Yeah, no, I don't think so either.
So I was listening to the audiobook, like I was doing immersion reading. So I also like Lowell because his the person who gave voice to him, he did a fantastic job. I think it was Michael Kramer who did it, but when he takes Lowell's voice, it's, I don't know, really fell in love with the what do you call that? The voice he rendered for him. So I liked that character as well as such in general. So these are my two favorites, apart from the main three characters. I have a
Great picks.
question to the experts here. So I don't know if this was a spoiler, but anyway, I heard about this. That Wheel of Time is not medieval.
No.
And but I don't get that feeling from book one. So am I okay in thinking that still if nobody told me, I would think this is, medieval because the sword and stuff like that.
So there you will get, as you get further into the books, when they start talking about the distant past, to us it sounds very futuristic. So
Mhm.
essentially it's not really a spoiler, it's more world building, but
Okay.
I would say that this is set on Earth in the very, very distant future, post-apocalypse, where we've kind of reverted back
Mhm.
to a medieval society.
Mhm.
Well, it's still so it's not really medieval, it's more like pre-Renaissance.
Yeah.
Is kind of the thing, which a lot of it too, like Jordan was really specific about that because he always got mad when people called it medieval. But it does make sense because it's fantasy and that's what people expect. But some things with just the technology that exists, like clocks are very common. The people are mostly literate. Um, and knowledgeable, and there'll be other things as well that are kind of shown to show that while this is still, they don't really have like technology like we'd come to think of it now. They're not like in the medieval dark ages. They have things that otherwise you wouldn't expect it at those times. So as you get further, you'll see more bits that kind of hint at that. But I think most people don't really think about whether or not like they had clocks in the Middle Ages or not. So even though there's a lot of clues there, they're not always super evident. Yeah, and when Andrew was saying that is, there are a lot of hints at that even in the Eye of the World, about like time being circular and
Yeah.
our world
Mm.
being in the past.
Mm. And also, I've heard somebody refer to it as kind of science fiction. So again, I was taken aback. I'm just asking you, is it so, or is it purely fantasy, or are there science fiction elements in it in some way?
I
I'd
would
say
say,
more what he explained is like the premise
yeah,
sounds
it's
kind
like
of
a
sci-fi.
sci-fi premise, but you're not really shown. It could easily be just pure fantasy,
Mm-hmm.
done through, kind of where the thing where science becomes magic, or magic becomes science, one of those things. But yeah, basically the world will have progressed to a certain point where science and magic are indistinguishable.
Okay.
And so yes, it can feel a little bit sci-fi, but I mean that's literally like a couple chapters in the entire series.
Mm-hmm.
And so I wouldn't let it be a sticking point, mainly because it's just more of a, oh, that's kind of cool. That's really all that is. Really, we
Yeah,
are set, as Niko said, in this more Renaissance world.
Okay. So no time
yeah.
travel.
There,
No.
If I
well,
didn't know those
not
like
really.
things, those hints about it being set on Earth, like it being set on Earth in the far distant future is like a sci-fi premise, like you said, but I didn't know that until I mean, I think I heard it from one of you guys, Andrew or Niko. I think it was Andrew. I'm not
That
sure.
sounds about right.
But um yeah. Uh but like if I didn't know that, I just wouldn't have like I just would have read it as pure fantasy and then,
Mhm.
you know?
He
And I
pulls a
mean,
lot
it
of horror
really
elements
is.
from.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Niko.
Yes, sir. I think we were going pretty much the same direction, but yeah, it really is. It's a fantasy story, but there are so many little hints and Easter eggs that just point toward that aspect that it kind of has that premise. And a lot of it you don't notice the first time through, especially if you're not expecting it. You're not thinking like, oh, this takes place in our world in the far distant future after some cataclysm. Like you're not thinking that at all, so you wouldn't be looking for these clues.
Yeah.
But that's where, yeah, there were a couple of things that stuck out, and I'm like, what the heck is this? And like that's where I started like really digging in and online, and like I was in a forum about the Wheel of Time. Like I dig through all the different blogs about the Wheel of, like I got super crazy into it too, and I feel like those things really provide that.
Mm.
But I've heard it said that originally Robert Jordan was going to make this a little bit more sci-fi, which is evidenced his book, The Warrior of Altai, which was like a precursor to Wheel of Time, was much more science fiction than the Wheel of Time was. But he kind of, I think he left some of the premise, but really made it more of really just a high fantasy story.
Mm. Interesting. But I would have really liked to have discovered it on my own, but now I can't help it. It's all over the internet. Like everybody is talking
I
about
don't
it.
I don't think I would have discovered it on my own, to be quite honest. Well, maybe on a reread.
Mm.
Yeah, it's really something that you really only pick up on a reread.
Oh, okay. Okay.
It's not like, don't get me wrong, if you're paying attention, it's definitely there for you to find.
Mhm.
Like he doesn't hide it, he doesn't bury it. But I mean, honestly, if I think I discovered it on my like second read through of the series.
Mhm. Okay. So, yeah, not big of a spoiler then.
Yeah,
So,
I'm more just like putting Easter eggs together. So you'll probably be really excited if you catch one when you're reading through and be like, that's this or something. So
guys, I really like the prologue. Like, I think the best part for me about book one was the prologue. I, I don't know, the way the scenes were written and the angst and the pain of Louis Theron. I mean, it really, sucked me into the book from page one. What do you guys think of prologue? I mean, does it did it have the same effect for you, the prologue, or?
It did for me, I would say. It did.
hmm I agree. I've always loved the prologue, and it's the one negative thing is you get a lot more of like that uh, throughout, especially like the early books. You get more references later on, but I was just like, what on earth is happening? And that was a heck of a way to kind of start things.
Mhm.
And then just the transition to all of a sudden we're out in the middle of nowhere in the country walking along a
Right.
road. And it's just like I'm like, I need to figure out what this book is now. So
Exactly. Exactly. And that really, sucked me in. So from how did, it get from that beginning to this? So I really
yeah.
wanted to figure that out. So that really helped me to get into the book.
I would say for new readers, I have heard it said, not often, but I have heard it said that the prologue is it either really works for you or it can be a sticking point because it is a bit boring to go from this epic kind of crazy scene to the farm.
Mm.
And so a lot of people kind of get jarred and they want immediate answers, and Wheel of Time is just not that series that's
Mm.
going to give you that immediate catharsis of knowing what that was. Like it'll explain it a little bit, but it'll do it like, oh, there's this legend from way back in the day, and this is kind of our boogeyman, and here's why. And then like from there, you gotta kind of start peeling back the layers of an onion to figure out what that actually was, because it's not going to give you that answers even in that book. Like
Yeah.
it'll give you a lot of what happened there. It'll give you the backstory, and it'll give you what you think is correct, and then it'll kind of elaborate on that as the series progresses.
I think you make a really good point about it either working for you or not, because like personally, I've always been a big fan of prologues that are set in either a different place or a different time that you will then eventually connect. And what it actually reminds me of is the Stormlight Archive and how people have complaints about those prologues, whereas I loved them. Like I loved them. So I do think you are very right about like the type of reader you are, and it either works for you, like you want that mystery and you want to like unravel it slowly, or like you don't like it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it was also so well written. It was so impactful. I mean, it was there with me even at the end of the book. My version of the edition of the book had 770 pages. And while I'm ending it, also that initial scene was still with me. It was that impactful for me. And maybe it was more so because I was emotion reading and the actors were, so intense, and it was beautiful. So yeah, I think that is a great beginning to a great book series. I think so.
Yeah.
Do you want to talk about the role of women in the
Uh,
series? That's a quite important
Yeah.
theme, right? The role of women.
say of women.
Women, yes.
Oh,
In
yeah, sure.
general, yeah. I For me, I haven't read many fantasy, but the ones that I have read was mostly male centric, you may call it, right? Like if you think about Lord of the Rings also, but it was quite refreshing and kind of surprising for me, to see, Robert Jordan writing um, the kind of story where the women are given power, or they are, I mean, the men can also wield it, but they are not supposed to, or something like that, right? So it was quite refreshing. So, and back in the day when it was written, for those times also, it was quite progressive, I think. And do you think he did it intentionally, or do you have this information maybe from his interviews or blogs? Because I haven't done my research, so just for my information, was it done intentionally, or was it borrowed from some other concept or something like that?
Oh,
Niko,
it was, yeah, definitely intentional.
information there, but I personally, I think it's intentional.
Mhm.
Yeah, he has talked about it a lot, where it's very specifically he did set the world up that way, where basically the only magic users are women based on what's happened in the past. And you'll get a lot more information about that. But how does that affect the world when the only people who can use magic safely are women? And literally, if a man, starts to use magic, they're going to hunt him down and take the magic away. And so it kind of really places different roles on women, just kind of in general. So that's a really big part of it. And you get hints of that in the first book too, and you'll see it a lot more. But like there is a village council, which is men, but they kind of end up probably listening to whatever the women's circle does.
Mm.
And So things like that. It's just where in a similar time period, whether you're going back to like medieval or like Renaissance time, you probably wouldn't have seen women having as much power as they do versus. But that was a specific thing that he wanted to explore, as a world where women are on top, and it's a matriarchal society versus a patriarchal society. You do still get, I mean, he has some of that kind of like uh women are from Venus, men are from Mars type of like
Yeah.
80s stuff, where it gets a little cheesy sometimes.
Mhm.
But there are a ton of strong women in the series, and even the like younger annoying ones grow up for the most part and have really great plots too. You get to see all of the teenage characters tend to get annoying at points, but they really do grow a lot too.
Because when I was doing this, writing down the question for this session today, I also found some criticism about this exact point about, women are from Venus and men are from Mars, and people saying that he has this hard and fast, characteristics assigned to men and women, and and that's where he is failing as a writer, because gender norms, he is kind of reinstating them instead of breaking them. And like the men can do certain things, women can do certain things, and you are not supposed to overlap each other. And I didn't find that quite a great argument or anything. I thought it was nitpicking. And even somebody says later on in the series somewhere, Perrin kind of commits some kind of domestic violence. Again, I haven't read the books. I know only what was written in the blog. And why didn't the woman stand up? If you are living in a world where women have power and all this, what do you call that, privileges, then why did she not respond or stand up? So that was kind of yeah. Go ahead, Ed.
So
I just want to say really quickly, because I was laughing when you said that. I want to clarify. I was not laughing at the thought of domestic violence. I was laughing because I'm pretty sure you're talking about the scene that Grace complained really hard about in her video. I'm pretty sure that was you who specifically mentioned a scene, and I was just flashing back to your video, and I know because I know exactly what you're talking about, so that's why. But yeah, there are a lot of
Isn't it the
norms. That's
opposite though? I like
yeah,
it's not I don't want to say spoilers, but it's not the thing that you said. It's the opposite.
I do have some thoughts because there's a lot to unpack there.
Yeah.
yeah.
Specifically, from the way I understand it, there is a little bit of domestic, I won't say violence, but confusion is the best way I would put it. Essentially, what it is in that instance, Perrin is thrust into a culture he just doesn't understand. And so basically, he is encouraged to act in that sort of manner later in the book against his natural inclinations. It is very much explained. If it's what I'm thinking that you're talking about, that's very much the dynamic that his partner wants. But on that aside, like, I mean, it's a very, very delicate subject there. But in the role of women, it's very much Jordan does a little bit of the male gaze, a little bit of the male fantasy, but at the same time, it's very much a matriarchal society where kind of the men had their day and they caused the apocalypse. And so it's very much that, the women have stepped forward and taken charge. But at the same time, like, the men are a little resentful of it, but they still respect the women and they defer to them because, almost in their cultural subconscious, they know, hey, we done screwed this pooch already.
Okay.
And so we do get a lot of strong female characters. Are they perfect? No. Do they have flaws? Yes. Is any male author going to be able to fully capture a female character? Probably not. Or, I mean, you can get close, but without like deferring or like bringing in an actual female author to check your work. Who knows? Like, I know a lot of people have problems with Nynaeve. I know a lot of people have problems with Egwene and things of that nature, but they are still in their own right strong female characters who drive this narrative, despite the fact that the chosen one is male.
Yeah.
With
And
Nynaeve,
there are
She's
Okay.
interesting because I don't like I always try and separate where I don't dislike her as a character and the way that she's written in world. I just don't like her as a person.
That's fair. Fair. That's
That's
completely
fair.
fair.
Like, you know what I mean? Like, you're right in what you're saying about the fact that she's like a strong female character and like I think very interestingly written. I just don't like her.
That's fine.
Yeah, I wouldn't like her as a real person either. I
No.
don't think, but there's a lot to, and that's where I think people, most criticisms you'll find of Wheel of Time, to at least an extent, are fair. It is a flawed series like anything else, and the super fans like Andrew and myself, like we could go, poking fun at stuff in the Wheel of Time for hours because we've read it, we know, and there's a lot of jokes and stuff. But you do get, it's kind of like what's on the surface level and what is really being shown, because Jordan does do a lot of gender dynamics, and some of that's even literally built into the magic system. Like men are stronger in certain elements, basically, of the power, and women are stronger in others. And it's really uncommon for there to be like a woman who's really strong in earth. For example, would be one of those pieces, but it's shown throughout too how much that can change. And there's kind of an overall message that you know, basically like working together, men and women, is a solution. So you get a lot of that, and I think part of it's the time period. Um, because Wheel of Time was published in the 90s, but it was something he had planned in the 80s, and it would have fit really well in the 80s too. That was kind of what was expected. So I think he did some of those things that for the time were kind of just what you did in fantasy, but also had more of a message. But I mean, like, I can't deny there are definitely some scenes where it is most certainly like seems like this is more for the male fantasy than for the plot. So there are a few of those throughout. There aren't like a ton, I wouldn't say, but for the most part, yeah, there's definitely a good different message behind it.
Well, in the male gay stuff, if you're not looking for it, you can miss it. Like I didn't catch like the Aes Sedai totally just drop their shirts in a lot of their ceremonies, but I didn't catch that until my fourth read through.
I didn't think that was like the fact that they have to do certain things for certain ceremonies. I didn't find it strange, to be quite honest, because they're only Aes Sedai there.
Mm, okay, but
Yeah.
I think Game of Thrones does the same thing, but it does to both the genders, right? You see naked men
I
as well,
The
right?
Song of Fire leans more heavily on it, if you ask me, like nudity and stuff and sexuality.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah, Game of Thrones goes more into the actual just straight up sex.
Mm.
hmm Wheel of Time is more like the fade to black behind the curtain kind of thing, which honestly I much prefer. Um, I'm just being honest. I'm not a huge fan of sex scenes in books. I don't really care for them that much, so I much prefer to be like, we can all figure out what's gonna happen here. Let's just move on. So
That's like, the 90s Bollywood movie. So, the hero and the heroine is about to kiss, and there is a flower right in between. Let's see, you don't see what's happening.
that's
yeah,
Sorry.
you could figure it out. You don't need it to be explicit. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
So,
Angela and Grace, I've got a question. How do you like the combat and how it is presented, like the action sequences, the sword fighting? How do you like how that's portrayed in the Wheel of Time?
I like it. I mean, I feel like I um don't like analyze it too much. The thing that I find important is if I can follow what's going on, because some authors I can't picture it, but I feel like with Robert Jordan I can, and I like the depictions of sword fighting and the stances and things like that. I think those are really cool. And I can usually picture what he's laying out if he's doing a battle or something. And as long as I can feel like I'm in it, you know how you're kind of feel when you're watching a movie if you're cutting between scenes and you're getting different characters' perspectives. I like it. So
What about you, Angela?
I like it. I don't love it, but that's because maybe again I have a recency bias because I just finished book two of Malazan, and Steven Erikson is a master of writing, fight scenes and combat scenes. So I kept comparing the scenes, some of the combat scenes to them, but then I just had to deliberately think, no, this is different. I shouldn't be comparing. But on its own, I really liked it. Why do you ask that? Is there a reason you're asking it, or
Well, from Erickson to Jordan, they're very, very, very different.
I feel
Um,
Very different.
yeah, they're very different. Robert Jordan doesn't do combat, like he doesn't do a stroke by stroke
mm,
combat.
right.
In fantasy, his combat is very, very unique. To the point where it is all swordplay is delivered in stances or in like Stooping Falcon or things of that nature. It leaves it up to the reader to visualize the combat and how that's flowing through.
Correct.
And I think it, because it allows your imagination to take over, of it gives you a generalization of what the stance might be,
Mm,
but then like you get to paint the picture of the combat and how all of that takes place. It's also not very gory at all.
mm,
Um,
I didn't think
and
about that with the
yeah,
stances. Maybe
it's
that's
a
why I
more
like it.
artistic combat than say like a Joe Abercrombie or a Steven Erickson, where it's like, oh, he shoved the sword in between the gorget and the blood spurted. It's none of that. It's not visceral. It's not in your face. It's
mm,
more beautiful and artistic.
mm. I agree. Yes, I felt that, and I thought about that. Like, it's not that very descriptive. You just he just tell you what happened. He doesn't explain you how exactly it happened. So yeah. So I mean, I don't have
Yeah.
complaints with either of the approach. I enjoy both of them actually. Yeah. Now we talk about the progressive side of Wheel of Time. I just wanted to talk about one more thing, the Green Man. Right? Is that some kind of an allure to environmentalism, or maybe a lesson that they have learned from the previous apocalyptic event or something like that? Am I right in guessing that?
That's kind of hard to talk about without spoilers.
So yeah, I would say for the most part, and Angela, you've read Lord of the Rings, or you haven't read Lord of the Rings?
I have.
Yeah, okay. So to me, the Green Man is pretty much Tom Bombadil. Um,
Okay.
I think, which is somewhat the point. Granted, you get a ton more information later in the series that kind of contextualizes what he was and stuff like that. And there's a lot more information later, but
Mhm.
I think that's more the point, that it was very much homage to Tom Bombadil from Lord of the Rings.
Okay.
Because book one had a lot of things that were really specific, that to do that, like the mountains of mist in Wheel of Time versus the Misty Mountains in Lord of the Rings, the mountains of Doom versus Mount Doom in Lord of the Rings. There were a lot of
Yeah.
specific things like that. So that's kind of where I got that. That's what that was for. You get more later to like contextualize it, but in the first book at least, that's how I would frame it.
Mhm.
Yeah, the first book is very, very much inspired and pays homage and pulls heavily from The Lord of the Rings and what J.R.R. Tolkien had put down and paved the road for. So Robert Jordan kind of picks that up and continues with it.
Mhm.
And then it's only when you get to book two, three, and through the rest of the series that it kind of uh, diverges and becomes its own thing. I wouldn't say it's an environmentalism trope
Mhm.
at all. I don't think there's some hidden message there. I've never seen comments from Robert Jordan about it being so. And I think Nico's got that on the head, where it's more of a Tom Bombadil homage.
Okay. Because and also where it's with the Green Man, I think it was the first time in the book, this death, birth, death, and rebirth kind of thing is clearly shown, I think, right? The first time in the book, like the whole wheel of time, or, I just realized while writing this notes today, that wheel of time literally translate in Indian languages to Kala Chakra. So means, again, wheel of time. Kala means time, and Chakra means wheel. I think you would have heard of the word chakra. It's very common. So, and I've heard that Robert Jordan borrowed the idea of the wheel of time, or the life is circular, from the Indian mythology. So that was quite a nice, interesting discovery for me while I was taking notes.
So cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, Robert Jordan built in his world is not it's not it is easy to mistake the Wheel of Time for basically just a whitewashed Renaissance world, when actually it is a world with just multiple cultures and inspirations, down to the dress and the way that these characters are described. You can definitely tell that this is a mixing pot world, where there are just tons of different just people who are living in relatively close, like, don't get me wrong, there's no like oceans and stuff, like there's oceans, but most of this takes place on a single nation that is just a mixing pot full of different people.
Mm.
I actually
Yeah,
really
you
like his
definitely.
cultures because he does a really good job of making them all actually different from each other, and they all have their individual like traits and customs, and like you said, like the way that they're dressed and the way that they're described, like you can, I mean, I probably wouldn't remember each of them specifically until I did a reread, but like in that idea, the way that somebody is described, you could tell where they're from or the way that they speak or things like that. It's really cool.
Yeah.
No, I definitely agree, and kind of touching on both of those points. I think that's what makes it so great because, Angela, like you mentioned, some of it comes from like Indian mythology, and there's so many like different. You can see little different inspirations. Like there's like a subtle nod to Norse mythology way late in the series. There's all kinds of different cultures. There's groups of people that are like based off of several cultures kind of like combined almost in a way, to just get these different people, but it's all of the different like countries, and even when you're just traveling from town to town, Robert Jordan very much will show you that like there are times even in like book one where they're like, oh, we're in an inn that's kind of far away and they're singing a song and we know the tune but all the words are different
Yes.
because
Mm.
regionalization is a thing. And so
Mm-hmm.
in a lot of older fantasy too, you would get like the different nation. It's just everybody in that country just is this specific trope or stereotype, and that's all they are. And that always really bugged me. But with Jordan, he would really flesh out like these people. Like, you'll get different accents, different ways of talking, different physical appearance sometimes, and also just like different whole cultures, and he really explores those cultures a lot too, which it makes it seem so much more real, especially as you continue to explore and see more of the different cultures, because there are so many different cultures uh, you get to explore throughout, and some you don't get to explore enough.
Mm.
Yeah,
But
this is actually a sticking point for a lot of fans of the series. Specifically, when the show was cast, a lot of people had issues with that, and it's really it's something that a reader of the series really needs to keep in mind, is that while there's no direct correlation, Robert Jordan has gone on record and said that no, this is not specifically this, but it may be inspired by this. He researched tons of cultures, real life cultures, but he didn't copy and paste them. He instead took aspects of multiple cultures and created some of his own to make this really unique world where basically, yes, this could be, going back to an earlier topic, Earth in the future, but time has gone on and these cultures are very different. These are unique cultures that are inspired by so many. like American, African, Chinese, Indian, all of the Middle Eastern, all of this is pulled together, changed, and turned into its own thing.
Mhm.
And that is part of the brilliance that was Robert Jordan.
Yeah,
Totally agree.
great. Yeah. Um, and also he has mentioned in his blog, I think, that he got his inspiration directly from America, because if you look at America, it's just like that, right? You can see people from all ethnicity and people from different countries all living in America, right? So he got that inspiration or idea also from there, to mix all these cultures together and put them in one place and see how it works out. So I really like that part actually of the book, because mostly fantasy is white, if I may call it, like, Eurocentric, or if you think Lord
Mhm.
of the Rings and all that. So I find this aspect of Wheel of Time very, very attractive, and I think it's a great selling point to would-be readers.
Yeah,
Actually,
and
this
it
is.
does
I have a question.
start.
Just a random question. Do we
Oh
actually
yeah.
know the name of the continent?
No,
Okay.
which is that is one of the most annoying things about the entire series. It's never named.
Okay. I didn't
So
think it was yet anyway. I wasn't sure if I had missed
yeah,
that.
no, it's never
Don't
really named. Most commonly, it's called the Westlands, which geographically doesn't really make sense unless you're coming from somewhere to the east, which I won't talk about since Angela's only read the first book so far. But so it's called the Westlands, or a lot of people call it Randland, which
Yeah.
I've never heard before as a name.
I don't like that. I don't
like
think.
that at all.
Randland.
It's just
That's
yeah. I
really
like I want a name that sounds like it would be in world,
hmm
and so that's why I don't like that. But it's yeah. There's I think it might even be referred to as the Westlands in the Big White Book. I'd have to look. I didn't grab that one ahead of time.
He's got a whole maps and illustrations and
Oh
Wow.
yeah, not only do I have the encyclopedia, but I have this, which is like the field guide
Oh my
that came
God.
out. Um,
don't worry, Grace, that
they're
one's
actually
back.
redoing this. Yeah, this one is paper. Well, it's not a normal sized paperback. It's really big, but they are redoing this right now, um, in a new style. So, but this is not something you have to have. It's not even entirely accurate, because this is Robert Jordan and Teresa Patterson, and he wanted this to basically be as if an in-world scholar was writing it. So he was very cryptic and selective with his responses to the person who was trying to put this together. It would not always tell her everything or be completely truthful. So it's kind of crazy,
That's pretty
but
cool.
that's what it is. Yeah, it's
I've only
I don't know.
heard it referred to as the
I don't
Westland.
think it does say
I've heard
anything.
Randland, and that actually bugs the crap out of me.
I,
Randland, yeah, me too.
it's not a good name.
No, it's
Not a
not.
good
Why
name.
not?
Do better, wheelies. Do better.
Even just
I
looking at
mean,
the map, though, why would it be like you have the Aretha Ocean on the west?
Yeah.
So why would it be the Westlands?
I don't know.
it,
I always looked
I
at
think
the
it
map as a collection of nations and kingdoms versus a continent.
Mm.
if you look at the world map, it makes a little bit more sense. Which that's in here somewhere, but yeah, it's like it's basically people were trying to give it some sort of better name because of the fact that it is never named, and it is just that's really upsetting. And so that's kind of why it's called that. It's really not. There aren't a lot of other options.
Yeah,
So
that's
people
fair.
kind of
It's not a bad name. It's better than Randland.
base- It is. That's why like, I've always hated Randland as a name. So that's where I'm just, it's hard. Um, it is really hard because we get like the other places named. Um, oh, there it is. Here's the world map, which
Oh, so okay.
right here is the main area.
Okay. That's a
So
big,
there's other stuff out there.
it's an
Doesn't
awful
this
big.
look like the UK?
Yeah, it's all a bit different, but that world map has also been questioned.
Okay.
That is more specifically, I think, what Jordan said it should be. But people have pointed out there are certain plot points that don't make nearly as much sense if that map is accurate. So it's it's one of those things. He thought out the world almost completely, but geography were not his strong suits, and also population density was not a strong suit of Jordan's. So there are definitely times where there are way too many people, and it doesn't make a lot of sense if you like think about it from a very realistic standpoint. But um, you know, those aren't huge complaints for me. But name your darn country, continent, whatever. Come on,
It's a little late now.
I'm still mad.
I guess
I
Harriet,
know.
Harriet could come back and fix it if she wanted.
We need Harriet or Maria to just call it something. I mean,
Yeah.
come on.
Come on, McDougal.
To call it Loyal Land, he deserves it.
Yeah,
He's a
right.
good dude.
I think it sounds better than Randland.
Literally everything sounds better than Ranland, and I'm so happy to be that being a terrible name because that used to be. I don't know if it still is, but it used to be so common, and it always annoyed me.
You. So, do you have any points more to talk about the books? If not, I want to talk about the trailer before winding up, so we can still talk about. I have a lot of time, but I just want to check with you if you want to talk more about the books. If I have missed out something.
We haven't talked about the villains.
Ooh.
Yeah. I had actually a point. Sorry, I forgot about it. I actually noted it down here. So the question is not directly about the villains, but so we have this Lowell who's he's an ogre. Yeah. And he's often mistaken as I don't know, an evil character, Trolloc.
Yes.
Yeah. And
That's how I would pronounce both of those words.
okay. I'm very careful about how I pronounce that. I don't want to embarrass myself. So why,
Judge you.
as experts, why do you think, is it because of the size, because they both are the same, or is it like it's the same species, but you get initiated as Trollocs or something like that?
It's literally just down to ignorance.
Okay.
Yeah,
100%.
isn't it just that people kind of think because he's big and he has more like animalistic like type ears and stuff that people just look at him and think that that's a Trolloc or
So the
Yeah.
Ogier are very secular, and the Trollocs are more Borderlands, out of sight, out of mind, like creatures of myth and legend. And so whenever an Ogier comes down, like, oh, we've never seen one of this before. It's not like us. It's got to be evil. It's got to be a Trolloc. It's just down to personally pure ignorance on.
Yeah, and it's.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, I was just fumbling at that point.
Okay, I'm sorry. Yeah, I thought you were finished, and then I'm like, oh no, he's still talking, so I felt bad. But yeah, it's just to continue on that. It's the ogres specifically are a completely unrelated different species, but it's just most people don't ever see an ogier in their life, and most people also. A lot of people at the time we're in, ogier are so uncommonly seen, and Trollocs are too, unless you're in the borderlands. People don't even believe either one of those things exists. That's specifically mentioned, especially the further south, the further away from the blight you get, where no shadow spawn has been seen in who knows how many years. People are just like, oh, it's just a story, it's not real. And there's still not like quick travel that happens, so like people don't know, even though the borderlands will tell them like no, they're very real. But yeah, ogier are a very specific species, whereas Trollocs are, I don't, do you guys think it's a spoiler to confirm how Trollocs are made,
I
or should
would
I
think
not?
it would be a little bit.
Okay, I won't say that then. Trollocs are completely different though.
Okay.
I'm not even sure if I know yet how they're made.
Yeah,
So maybe I should.
rest.
Yeah, okay.
I think that's a little bit of a spoiler, just because it kind of ruins one character and a little bit of history.
Fair enough.
Okay.
So I would leave
Fair
that
enough.
vague, because I
I'm
like
not.
I
I'm
like
not
their
gonna.
origins. I think it's cool.
Yes.
Oh,
Yes.
I wouldn't use that word
Okay, it's
myself, but
gruesome.
it's very compelling, and you're like, oh
It's
my,
interesting. There we go. That's the
yeah.
word I was looking for.
It can
Interesting.
still be cool, just like in a not good way.
Yeah. When you get there, you'll realize you'll be like, oh yeah, that's not cool. It's interesting that that's the case. So yeah, you'll find more. You'll find a lot more about the very twisted ways that shadow spawn are brought into being.
Yeah.
So the villains. So you have the Trollocs, and then you have Murtrol,
Mid-roll. Yeah.
Droll, and then shadows. Are they actually somebody different, or it's a name for mid-drops?
Shadow spawn is kind of a generalization for just evil creatures.
Okay.
And then you've got dark friends.
Yes.
And then those are just humans who serve the darkness, the dark ones. And then you've got the is it Forsaken? It's been a minute.
Yeah, the Forsaken.
Yeah, so
Yeah,
you've got
you
those.
don't really start seeing them the most part until 2 and 3, though.
So you've
Yeah.
got the 13 Forsaken, and then you've got the dark one.
Mm.
And
I'm
that's
not
kind
gonna
of
lie, I'm desensitized to it now, so it doesn't phase me. But the names, they made me laugh at first. I was like, "Dark Friends, are you serious?" It's just really funny to me because I'm like, this is so like, it sounds cheesy. Like, oh yeah, Dark Friend. It's
it
like,
is a bit on the cheesy side. There is, I mean, it's very, very simple naming convention.
it is.
But at the time, like, there was no need to come up with like fancy names because, frankly, there wasn't. I mean, there was fantasy, but there wasn't a whole lot of epic fantasy. Like, I think there was Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn. There was Lord of the Rings. Um, there was, Thomas Covenant, but there wasn't anything like. I mean, all of this is pretty much within the last 20 years.
It's a good point. Yeah. Like you do make a really good point. He kind of just named them what they were,
Yeah.
but it's a little funny.
And also,
There's definitely some things like that from the time period.
yeah, and also I think it could be something that was coined by the people, because they associated these people with Dark Lord, and the people in the place, or the colloquial term was Dark Friend, maybe something like that. Maybe we can think of it that
It's
way
apparently
ourselves, right?
Makes sense.
Game of
You
Thrones.
do get a few
and Game
different
of Thrones were
terms.
coming out at the same time.
Wait, what did you say, Andrew? I didn't
I
hear.
was saying like for fantasy wise, it predates Rumble the Elderlings by a little bit, I think. And Game of
Realm of the
Thrones was
Elderlings is
also coming out
95,
at the same
I
time.
think.
I think
95.
Assassin's Creed came out in like 97.
Oh, okay. Same year as Game of Thrones.
Did Game of Thrones come out in 97? I thought it
Oh,
came
wait,
out.
no. 96, I think.
To me.
Yeah, looks like 96. Wheel of Time is 1990, though, I think, world. Yeah, 1990.
Yeah, so it's literally just a product of the time when it comes to the naming convention.
Yeah, that's where, like I said too, and I try to warn people, because if you're very, very used to reading modern fantasy, you will find some things that seem very cheesy because it's, once again, you're going back to 1990s when the first book was published, but this was truthfully something he was working on in like probably even the 70s to an extent, but then the 80s is when he was really like working on this, and then finally started publishing it in the 90s. So it definitely does feel dated at some points. What's more impressive to me is that you would expect some parts to be dated or maybe not have aged that well, but so much of it really, really did stand the test of time. And so I look at that a little bit more, just because the series for me, it completely holds up overall, like with the things it did, despite the fact that this was being written over 20 years. um I think there were a lot of great things, but you will get some of those cheesy things, but it's like it's so much better than some, because like that's the and I don't know when Belgariad was published. I think that was the 80s. But
I
that
would put
whole
David Eddings and
series,
Robert Jordan in the same category.
they were around the same time, but it's just Eddings was like only tropes, and it was really annoying.
To that point as well, though, like whenever I see people talking about maybe tropes that are overused, that are used in Wheel of Time, I always think like likely they weren't overused.
Yeah, they were still fresh.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or like Wheel of Time was probably the first one to do some of them. So
It-
whenever I see that, it does annoy me a little bit, because I'm like, okay, I do get that, like, you don't, as a reader, if you don't enjoy it, it's okay, you don't have to read it, but you do have to at least acknowledge
Mhm.
that it wasn't written now, when
Mhm.
like all of these tropes have had 20 years to be in existence. It was written.
It is in fact a classic.
Yeah. Yeah.
We're approaching 30 years. It's a series that's 30 years old.
Mhm.
Wait,
Um,
it's
while that may
31
not
and a
sound
half.
like very classic in the world of fantasy, I mean, fantasy as a whole didn't really take off until the 2000s, where it just exploded with all of these authors.
And like all of this laid work for it, and stuff that seems basic, only stealing maybe, or storytelling conventions that seem basic in like Lord of the Rings, for example, would be like Lord of the Rings is deep, like
Right.
that from. Yeah.
Reading something that's older or more classic, I will give a little bit more of a pass for tropes, keeping in mind when it actually came out. But I mean, the Eye of the World came out a little over 30 years ago. So I mean, yeah, when you think about it, it's all the stuff that's been done in that time. There's a lot of stuff that's continued on, and it does do, like we talked about earlier, it starts with using a lot of like Lord of the Rings things that kind of had become tropes, which was intentional to use that as a stepping off point and go from there. But it did a lot of things really well, I think.
Yeah, and I think that's where, if you're starting off with Wheel of Time now in this age and time, it's good to have a little bit of preparation in terms of talking to the community and of what to expect and things like that, so you don't get, disappointed, and you go in with the right kind of expectations, and give it a chance, at least 3 or 4 books. I think that would be a nice thing for new readers who want to start, with the Wheel of Time, to do a little bit of prep and research and, background into, the time it was written, and, a little bit into the author and things like that, and just talk to the community. And I think the Wheel of Time fan community is very careful in not giving out these spoilers. So I think it's safe to navigate the community.
Yeah, typically
Not
like
saying Google things, though. Don't do that.
Yeah, never Google things. Hard
Oh.
agree.
No, but like I always give the advice, if you've started the Wheel of Time and you're 3 books in and you're not having fun, abandon ship. Like it's not gonna get it's not going to blow your mind after the 3rd book. Like you're by then you should be in it, you should be committed, you should be enjoying yourself, or at least not hating it.
Mm.
And so like literally by book 3, like yes, the first 6 in my opinion are some of the best. And if by book 3 you're not in it for the ride, like get off the ride. Like it's just you're just gonna hate read the rest of the series.
Mm. So
But a lot
talking
of people say book 4 is their favorite. Which that's kind of like book 4 is where it breaks off and starts to like really expand. But yeah, and I agree. If you're not feeling it, you just might not, and that's okay. It's definitely it's a favorite series for both Andrew and I, but it's everybody's different, and that's totally fine. But I think yeah, giving it a chance and contextualizing that you might have some dated things like that or some other things, I think makes a lot of sense to know what you're getting into.
Book 4 is my favorite so far, but I feel like the biggest thing is that like Andrew said, if you're not enjoying it by book 3, it's not like the style is going to get different,
Hmm.
it's going to be what it is, because you already like should have a good idea by that point what it is.
Yeah, like
100%.
you're not even halfway through at that point. Like you've got a whole lot more of the same.
I had somebody
Yeah.
comment on one of my like spoiler chats, not rudely or anything, just saying that they had read 8 books and they didn't like it, and that they were going to finish out of stubbornness. And I was like, I'm sorry to hear that you're not enjoying it, but I don't understand you as a person.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's at that point it's not going to get better for you.
I can do that with a trilogy, but 15 books is a bit much.
Yeah. If you don't like it, yeah, it's too much to push through. But I think with book 1 itself, I am so connected to the characters already, and I want to know where they're going, what's going to happen to them. So yeah, I'm hooked. And after the conversation, I'm so pumped. I just want to start reading. I'm actually reading.
Do it.
Yeah, I'm actually reading Dune now. So maybe I should, you know.
I love Dune as well.
I would say Dune's really good, but I'm always going to vote Wheel of Time. So.
Well, I've never read Dune, so I would also vote Wheel of Time.
Here you go.
Cool. So villains, coming back to villains. Andrew, you want to talk some more about villains?
Well, specifically, like a lot of, I'm trying to think of how to approach this from a non-spoiler perspective. The structure of the way that evil is approached in this book, you've kind of got your godlike evil character Shaitan, the Dark One. And then you've also got you've got lieutenants, and then you've got the just minions. And what really makes this feel classic is, if you watch like a lot of the old fantasy cartoons or read a lot of old fantasy books, the trope is that the Dark One sends out his lieutenants, who then sends out the minions, who fail miserably, and then come back to the lieutenants and it's like, curses foiled again. It's very much that sort of villainy that a lot of people don't quite connect with, because it's the inept villain a lot of the times. And later on in the series you get that a lot more.
Mm-hmm.
And so I just kind of wanted to know, Grace, you're 6 books in, Angela, you're 2 books in. I just kind of wanted to get your thoughts and opinions on that style of villainy.
So that doesn't, okay, I won't say it doesn't bother me, because obviously if that's too heavily used, it does come through and start to grate a little bit. But without saying any spoilers, obviously the villains that I like are not the villains that I like are not those ones. So I'm good with the ones that I do like. I find them very interesting. And that's all I'll say.
So in book one, we don't get to see too much of the Dark Lord or anything, right? So only the Trollocs and Myrddraal. So I think they were scary enough for me. One thing I might have a problem with is, but then again, I have to just remind myself that it's classic fantasy, is the fact that I'm a sucker for gray villains, and I don't think we get that in Wheel of Time. I'm not expecting that. Also, it's more like Voldemort kind of person, right? You're bad and you're completely bad, right? So that was maybe something which initially bothered me, but then I reminded myself, hey, you're reading a classic fantasy, you cannot expect that. So I don't have a problem with bullying. I think, and even the voice actors did a great job, to create that scary, intimidating scenes. So it was okay for me.
Well,
Yeah,
one thing
I
that
will say
I can
the
say,
the villains do get.
you will
Oh,
get
go
some
ahead, Andrew.
great villains as well.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Oh, okay. Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, they do get given more depth, a lot of depth later on.
Hmm.
There are still some of those circumstances where, they could have been used a little bit differently, but you get a ton more information and more specific people later on once you get further in. So,
Hmm. Okay, that's good. Do you want to jump into the trailer?
Sure.
yeah.
So, question to everybody: did you like the trailer?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Mhm.
Yes.
Yeah,
It got
I.
me really hyped.
Mhm.
I was afraid that I wasn't gonna be excited for the show because I was like, oh no, it could go so many ways. But I don't know, it got me really excited after watching it.
Mhm. I heard a lot of complaint. I actually did a video on it also, that um, it doesn't give away much. So because basically the trailer was cut for the book readers or the fans and not for the general public. That's a complaint that's floating around on the internet. I don't agree with that personally, because for me, trailers, generally I like trailers which do not give the plot away or anything away. I just want to be intrigued. I just want to know what's kind of happening, but not exactly what's happening, so that I can go in, without knowing what the stuff is, and then watch the movie or the series or whatever it is. So for me personally, that was not an issue, but I was quite annoyed by everybody complaining that, hey, this is just a fan trailer, just to appease or attract the fans. Did you think that?
Not at all. Um,
I mean, it's a teaser.
there's enough original content in that trailer that won't appear in the books. To say it was made for the fans of the books, like, yes, you'll recognize like weaving, which is the magic system. You'll recognize some of the characters, but I mean, a lot of those scenes like just don't appear in the books.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's a teaser trailer too. It's not meant to be like a full-on cinematic trailer, but
Mm.
I also they seem to really be trying to keep most things besides the base plot close to the chest because they don't want to spoil people. Um, and they probably don't also, they are going to be changing things, and they've been pretty upfront with fans about that, but they don't want to like announce some big thing and have people like, oh, we're not even going to watch now. But also just for people who don't know the story, they want people to be hooked in as well. So
Mm.
like there was a lot of really cool, interesting stuff there. Yeah, would people who are not fans of the books probably not know what was going on in a lot of it? Yeah, but like they'd see like, what the heck is that crazy monster thing? What the heck is this magic? These people like I think there's stuff that would interest everyone and make them want to see what is going to be happening.
I wouldn't expect this show to go on for 15 seasons, and timeline wise, that's just not feasible. Yeah, so I'm expecting like 7 to 8 seasons
Mhm.
for the show. So they're going to condense a lot, and they're going to change storylines. But if I understand correctly, Sanderson and Harriet McDougal, which is Robert Jordan's wife, are involved in the show, and so like Rafe, who is the showrunner, consults them before making changes to make sure that the story still delivers the same message. And like I think we're gonna start at the same start point and reach the same end point. It just may be a little bit different on how we get there. But I don't think anybody's character arcs are going to be changed a whole lot.
I think that in terms of the complaint about the trailer being for book readers, there's also something to be said for the fact that if you were talking about just any TV show being made, if it wasn't based on books, this is what I imagine a teaser trailer would be like anyway.
Right.
Right.
You know, like just giving you tidbits, like you said, Niko, it wasn't meant to be a full cinematic trailer where it's laying out the storyline for you. So I don't really understand the complaint, I guess.
Yeah, me
I
too.
think some people were just going to complain no matter what.
That's true.
People complained about the lighting. They didn't like the lighting of the trailer.
Just nitpicking, I think. But I don't like story trailers. I generally avoid them. I watch it like teaser trailer and stuff, but I want to go in without knowing anything. So I think it was quite okay. But to non-readers, what would you recommend? Would you recommend to wait till to watch the show and then read the book if they're interested, or read the book first, at least book one, because I think it's coming out on November 19th, so they can, I think, finish one book, because my husband started reading it, seeing my enthusiasm. I was non-stop talking about Wheel of Time and the trailer and stuff like that. So he's like, okay, fine, give me book one. And he was doing the calculation. So if I read 11 pages per day, he's a non-reader, he doesn't read books. So he's like, okay, 11 pages is not much. So if I read 11 pages now, I will finish by November 15th. And then I'm ready for the show on November 19th. So what would you recommend? Book, wait for the show and then read, or book first?
In my mind, it would depend on what kind of reader you're talking about, because I think that if you're actually talking about somebody like who doesn't read much, it would be an extremely tough sell to tell them that they're getting into a 15 book series if they read the first book. So like I would probably say maybe watch the first season, but like if you're talking to a fantasy reader, then I would be like, yeah, I would probably think it would be better to read a few of the books first, because that would be maybe a more reasonable request for them. So
Yeah.
It's kind of hard because the first season is supposed to cover aspects of book one and book two, and then like but not all of it. So it's gonna the show's gonna play with the timeline a little bit.
Okay.
And so it's hard to say, hey, yeah, just read the first two books in the next month or the next couple months, because they are big beefy books. And like Grace said, if you're not a fantasy reader, that's a hard ask. So I would say if you haven't already started the series, it's a little late now. So I would instead probably watch the first season, and then in the interim between the first and second season, or even in the middle of the season, I mean, by all means, you can start the series whenever you like.
Yeah.
But
I
yeah.
think, yeah, I think it's a good idea, because I watched Game of Thrones first, and then I started reading the books, because the show made me, you know, interested in those characters and the storyline, etc. So I, decided to read the book, and it definitely helped me sometimes, in sometimes with the names and with the characters, to understanding them better, because I know them from the show, and it was much better. So maybe it might work for Wheel of Time as well, yeah, to get them interested, and maybe overlook the pacing issues, because they know what's going to come, and then they know what to expect, so they won't complain much. I think.
Yeah, that's
I'm just excited for people to start the series either way. If it's because you want to read some before the show, if it's you like the show, want to read it, it's always a positive thing if people are starting the Wheel of Time in my book.
Right? Yes, I'm sure once the show is out, a lot of people will. I mean, the sales of the books will go up for sure.
yeah.
There's no doubt about that. Um, anything else you want to discuss? Those were the points that I had.
I think we covered a lot of ground.
Yeah, for a non-spoiler discussion, we have covered a lot of ground.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I got a lot of good information and a lot of motivation, to read book 2 now. So yeah.
This was helpful for me even because like Lord of Chaos is staring at me. I'm only like 30 pages into it and I'm like, that's a big book, but I want to read it. So
I like Lord of Chaos. Lord of Chaos is a really good book, in my
I've
opinion.
been told actually
Let the
by
Lord.
Angela from Literature Science Alliance that I will really like Lord of Chaos, she thinks. So
Wow. Niko was saying something, sorry.
Oh no, I was just let the Lord of Chaos rule. It's just a line. It's just a line from that book.
I'm ready.
Okay, so in that case, then I think we can wind up. I really, really am so grateful to all the three of you for agreeing to this collab. I really appreciate your time and your insights. I hope we can do this once again soon, maybe after the season 1 releases. Never know.
That'd be cool.
Sure.
Right?
Definitely
So
game.
Any reason to talk Wheel of Time?
absolutely.
100% same.
Was total fun. I really enjoyed talking to all of you. Thanks again, all of you. Thank
Thank you.
you. Bye bye.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.